nonprofits as implementers of programs, which is two very, very different things. The second point, a real expectation of failure, right? So a 10 VC investment portfolio, you'd have 1 or 2 blockbusters, maybe 3 or 4 that get you your money back, and the rest of them would just go bust. And again, that kind of 50% failure rate is something, I'm not saying we should aspire for failure, but you have to ask yourself, if you never really see failure, are you taking enough risk? And the third point is really around, how do you double down? When a for-profit investment starts to exhibit signs of success, that catalyzes more capital coming in. And again, there's a tendency at times in the nonprofit sector to be more attracted to seed funding, and when things start to go well, there's a sense of, well, maybe my capital isn't needed as much, rather than the sense of, this is working, I really need to double down on the investment. I think the really positive piece of this, especially for the people that are in the room, is the individual philanthropists are best in the position to act differently. And so it really is to all of you, and all of you, I literally think half the people raise their hands to that question. We all know about innovation, so I think we need to push ourselves and say, how do we bring what we know about innovation to this? It's more similar than different.
Thank you, Sasha. And last, we will hear from Cheryl Cohen-Efren. Cheryl was a developer of industry-specific manufacturing spaces for entrepreneurs in diverse industries, as diverse as fine jewelry to high-end food production. Her company, ATC, strategically redesigned former warehouses and organized shared services, often in collaboration with government and nonprofits. And this supported these businesses. Formerly empty warehouses became vital business hubs in neighborhoods of Long Island City and West Chelsea in New York, resulting in the retention and creation of over 5,000 jobs in attractive, fun business centers. Cheryl also has used these skills and channeling of resources to help bring about innovative solutions to urban challenges and opportunities through her role as a trustee of more than 20 nonprofits over the past 18 years, focusing mostly on urban issues. Now, many of you, as I have, may have volunteered for New York Cares, an organization which she co-founded. And now we are privileged to have her here with us today.
Thank you. I hope you'll continue to volunteer no matter where you live. I have a quiz for all of you, one that I have given to about 50 of my friends, people in their 40s and 50s in New York who sit on foundation boards and nonprofit boards and are actively involved and engaged in the city of New York in a civic way. And here's the quiz. You don't have to answer, but just in your mind, think about whether or not you can answer it, as I made them do it. And I won't ask any of you, since most of you are New Yorkers. I hope you know the answer. But in any event, for those of you from New York and other places with local and state government, who's your city council member? Who's your state senator? Who's your assemblyman? Who's your congressman? And we can go on from there. I will tell you that out of the 40 people in my house one night, only one got all of them right. And that shows you the state of people who are deeply involved in civic organizations in at least the city of New York of a certain age and place. And not to make any of you feel bad who didn't get your council member or your state assemblyman correct, my husband got them all wrong, and I still talk to him that night, and in fact, you'll hear later he's been very helpful in helping me with a new civic venture. And the reason I bring it up and the reason I have quizzed people is that being involved in civic organizations, being involved as members of a community is more than sitting on boards and more than giving out money. A friend of mine told me a story about introducing one of a major hedge fund operator who sits on the board of one of the most talked about foundations involved in social entrepreneurship and fighting poverty in New York. And this particular hedge fund manager met State Senator Patterson, who is now our governor in New York. And the first 20 minutes of the meeting with this hedge fund manager were spent trying to explain to this hedge fund manager that, in fact, New York State has a bicameral legislature in the same way that the federal government does. And again, there's no fault in not knowing that, but aren't we missing an opportunity to involve people who, in their chosen profession as elected officials, and in some cases in other places appointed officials, have devoted their life to service? And by not involving them in possible innovative activities with philanthropy, with nonprofits, aren't we losing some of the most talented people out there? I was a developer of manufacturing space in Long Island City, principally in the late 80s and early 90s. And because manufacturing in most cities is a little bit like nonprofits, many of my competitors, in fact, my only competitors were nonprofits. I was a for-profit business. I was a principal of a for-profit business. But we had services for keep these manufacturers in business and aggregated them to keep manufacturing growing and to create new jobs. And we had to be pretty creative in what those resources were, in part because the early 90s were a terrible time for real estate and for manufacturing in New York. And these tents were on very long-term leases, so there was self-interest here too. But the truth was that we came up with ways of working with community colleges. Through their co-op program, we provided job training for employees, and they got a tax benefit. We used municipal bonds. We even used the work release jail, which was a state-funded facility next door, and brought those employees in to work in the factories with their job coaches, which the factory owners loved. And from that experience, what I've learned is that there is a lot to be gained from having the various for-profit, nonprofit, and government entities working together. And I wish there were an acronym or some sort of a better abbreviation for it, but the best one I can come up with is NOPRO-COGO, which is nonprofit, corporate, and government together. And there are two examples of that. It's a real mouthful, and if anyone can come up with a better one, we'll take it. It's not catchy. Freelancers Union is much better. And there are two very quick examples of how these have worked together, and where innovation really flourishes, I think, is at the juxtaposition of those. And one is a program done by Chauncey Parker, who was a state employee. He, under Pataki, ran criminal justice, and he was able to take drug forfeitures, which are anything that drug dealers have in their possession that can be turned back to the government. He took the money from drug forfeitures and reapplied it to renovating an armory in Harlem, one of the most underserved populations for kids in New York, and created a huge sports center and tennis center operated by the Police Athletic League. So again, a government official working with a nonprofit. And he invited me to come look at the facility, and what we realized standing at this 100,000 square foot armory was that across the street, which no one ever looked out the windows, it's an armory, the windows are this big intentionally, were 8 ball fields, 6 basketball courts, a fabulous city-run park and playground. And by just working with the city government and a little bit of foundation money, which we were able to get for him, we were able to co-program all these together and really create the equivalent of what in New York is the most glorious for-profit venture, Chelsea Piers, for poor kids in New York. Very exciting. The other one is one I'm involved with now, and I have to be a little sketchy about it because it's actually being announced by the Mayor's Fund, by Bloomberg's Mayor's Fund for Innovation, later this month, but it's something I'm very excited about. And this is where my husband and his failure on the civics exam comes in. A friend of mine who's now Sean Donovan, who was the housing commissioner and an old friend of mine, and it's relevant only because it was the city person who asked me this question, in October said, how are we going to save New York? Things are really falling apart. And of course I said, I'm not sure I can save New York, but let me come up with something. And together we came up with an idea where we would, and it's not a new idea, it's innovative because it was the right time and place and the right people. Others have done similar ones. I stole from a lot of people. We've recruited 40 of 100 business executives in their 40s and 50s, people who are at the top of their field, to become mentors to nonprofit executives in a two-way partnership. Mentor is really the wrong term. To help nonprofit executive directors in social service really figure out some new economic models for getting through the next few years. And we've decided to do this through the Mayor's Fund, in part, mostly because I truly believe you need to invest in talent, and the talent for identifying and really ushering through this pro bono help is best found in city government. And I'm proud to be a citizen of New York where that is the case. And the deputy mayors and the mayors and the people who are in the Mayor's Fund are doing a phenomenal job in helping us and helping the staff person I've placed under their care